Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, Executive Editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the ideal list of Handel oratorios. 15 of these suckers. That's a lot of oratoriizing, trust me. And, of course, part of the issue is deciding just what a Handel oratorio is, because there are many more works than merely technical oratorios. They're choral and vocal and whatnot. And so I have assembled what I consider to be the basic list for, serious Handelians, people who really want to experience, obviously if there are 15 of them, who want to experience Handel oratorios in all of their splendiferous variety, but who aren't so crazy that you want to get every single scrap and little bit of musical whatever that Handel actually left us, because you don't have to dig around in the Handelian armpit, as it were. So here we have 15 oratorios, and if you are starting out as a Handel person and you like Messiah and you want some other stuff, then the way to deal with it, I'm going to describe what these are, and the way to deal with it is simply just pick the ones that you think are going to interest you, the stories that you think are cool, or the titles, or whatever interests you, and as many of them as you like. You don't have to go for all 15. If you want to come up with your own alternate list, including alternate performances of some of these works, plus the works that I've left out, feel free to let me have it. Handel was just, Handel was Handel. He just dripped music, tons and tons and tons and tons of it, unbelievable quantities of it, and making sense of it all is a life's work, just wrapping your brain around it. The basic structure of a Handel oratorio, although there will be differences, as you'll see, but the basic structure is something in 3 parts, or 3 acts. It's the same thing, essentially, as a Baroque opera seria, with the same number of individual things in it, generally around 50. Now, those 50 can consist of solo arias, instrumental numbers, choruses, recitatives that are accompanied or whatever, and they have their own individual numbers. It's just the convention of the time. And normally there are about 50 of them, and the thing lasts about 2.5 hours, somewhere in there. Some are quite a bit longer, and some are a bit shorter, because people there expected, in those days, people expected their money's worth. They expected to spend many, many hours in the theater. And oh my God, can you imagine the stench? And it must have been just disgusting. But that's where they hung out. And that's what they did, and they wanted their money's worth, and Handel gave them their money's worth. Oh boy, was he one to give them their money's worth. And it took them quite a while to figure out what an oratorio was, because there was no precedent for it, not for the English variety, not for the kind of thing that was not essentially a da capo Baroque opera seria without staging, which is what Handel's early Italian oratorios are. They're on sacred themes and nothing happens, but still, that's essentially what they are, structurally speaking. The English oratorios, with their abundant choruses and far more theatrical settings, are quite different. And so it took him a little while to get his bearings on the whole thing. The first one, technically, was Esther. And I like Esther. Frankly, they're all wonderful. They have tons of great music, sometimes the same great music, because Handel was, of course, inveterately borrowing from himself and anyone else who happened to come along. But Esther is a lot of fun. It's a great story. The story of Purim, the story of the redemption of the Israelitish people, as they called them back then. Some of the characters are just Israelitish man, Israelitish woman. It's that's what it was. And then, after Esther, came Deborah. And Deborah's juicy. Deborah's really fun. But I'm not dealing with Deborah right now. Deborah, of course, has the fabulous attraction that the bad guy gets his skull crushed by having his head nailed to the floor with a tent peg after having been seduced. by the Israelitish woman. I mean, you gotta love it. You know, people in those days had a very, very different view about sex and violence. Sex was still pretty much taboo. But violence, violence was just perfectly fine. And as much of it as they could stick in there. Some of the dialogue in these things is just unbelievable. Unbelievably gross by our standards. Even, by our standards. It's buckets of blood and violence and destruction. And of course, it's all that blood and thunder Old Testament stuff. Although when Handel had New Testament stories, they weren't any tamer, not a bit. So let's get started with the fun and games of the 15 essential Handel oratorios. And like I said, this is an ideal list. In other words, these are all wonderful performances. There are no weak links. You cannot go wrong with any of these. Some of them will be available, some of them will not be. It's the usual crap with, things in print and out of print, but can't worry about that. We just have to talk about the music and hope that most of it is accessible at any given time. So the first one that we have to deal with is Athalia, which I used to think was Athalia. But, who was I, right? It's Athalia like Jeremiah. That's the way you pronounce Athalia. Now, Athalia, this is the Hogwood recording featuring Emma Kirkby and Joan Sutherland. And the only problem with these things is James Bowman, the world's worst countertenor. Well, he's the second worst countertenor. Alfred Deller was the world's worst countertenor. But Bowman is pretty scruffy as well. But he was the one that existed in those days in the UK. Now there are wonderful countertenors who can really, really sing and have beautiful voices and are superbly trained. But, okay, so you deal with James Bowman. And Joan Sutherland, the who was close to retirement, but wow, exploring her Handelian roots, and her voice couldn't be more different than Emma Kirkby's. Some people hated that. They said that, her voice was all wrong for this music, blah, 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 as if there were not people who had that kind of voice in Handel's day, like, your DNA wouldn't allow it or something. It's bullshit. So it's a wonderful performance, and boy, is this a fun oratorio. The story is really it's Athalia is the queen of the Jews, kind of, sort of, except that she's under the influence of the pagan high priest, and she's out to kill the last remaining members of the previous royal family who were deposed, and who are, of course, which was, of course, faithful to the one true God, and she fails and she dies, and yeah, that's all you need to know about that story. But it's a good story. I mean, it has a plot, a real plot, and the characters are well drawn. And Athalia herself really is sort of a tragic heroine. I mean, she's anti-heroine, let's put it that way. But she really is a finely drawn character. It's one of Handel's, first, or in the oratorios, really serious flesh and blood type people. And you've got great choruses. Oh, the pagans are always so much more fun than the Israelis. I mean, the Jews, or whatever they're called, they're just my people. I understand. But, I mean, I know. I mean, we complain a lot. We fetch. Everything is always terrible. We're always hoping that God will redeem us. And he does in the end. But in the meantime, there's a lot of complaining going on. And the pagans, they just have such a good time. You want to be a pagan. Handel was a pagan, I'm telling you. He gave his pagans all the good music and all these oratorios. I mean, of course, the Jews have the serious music and the laments. It's very beautiful, of course. But the pagans, wow, they're always just whooping it up, and they're sexy and sensual, and Handel really knew how to characterize them. And that's what they do in Athalia. So this is on Decca, and it's the Hogwood performance, which won a Gramophone Choral Award in 1987, in case you care. And it's marvelous. It's just marvelous. So Athalia is where we start. Next comes Saul. Now, this is technically Handel's fourth oratorio. Saul stands in the oratorios where the opera Julius Caesar stands in the operas, because Saul is Handel's largest and grandest oratorio, and it's a masterpiece from first beginning to end. It has fantastically lavish orchestration. It's got trombones, it's got a glockenspiel, it's got the carillon thing going in it. It's just an extraordinary piece of music with a fabulous plot. where Saul is such a tragic character as he slowly goes insane, and David is going to become king. And it's just wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. And my choice for Saul is this one with René Jacob on Harmonia Mundi, which was reissued, by the way, at lower price. It's probably out of print too. Who the hell knows? But it was easily available a while ago. And this is just a glorious, glorious performance. This is a big, serious music drama. Make no mistake. And it's just so richly textured. Oh, God, it's great. Just great. So Saul was Jacob. Then we get Israel and Egypt. Now, Israel and Egypt is famous because it has so many choruses. And when it was first performed, it was a terrible failure because it has so many choruses. People, of course, went for the star soloists who they expected to have lots of stuff to do. But for some reason, Handel in this work wanted lots and lots and lots of choruses for the 10 plagues and all the stuff that's going on. So it's not dramatic in that sense, but it contains quite simply the most glorious choral writing in like the history of choral writing. It's amazing in terms of its richness of texture and variety. And what makes it even more fascinating is that most of it was stolen from other composers, but Handel completely reworked everything he touched for the most part. I mean, one thing was like a Stradella Serenata, and this thing by a guy named Urio, and it's unbelievable how much Handel adapted for Israel and Egypt, but it seems to make no difference. The big issue with Israel and Egypt is that it has either 2 parts or 3. Because as is typical with the Jewish fetching style of, I mean, you don't know if Handel wasn't Jewish too, or the audience wasn't. Well, a lot of the audience was. And they were complaining. It must have been the Jewish part. They were complaining because they hated the oratorio, but there wasn't enough of it. It is absolutely the story of the little old Jewish couple coming home from the early bird special in Florida at 4:00, and the husband turns to the wife and says, "How was the dinner?" And she says, "Terrible. What did you think of it?" And he says, "Terrible, and such small portions." Well, that was the problem with Israel and Egypt. It was terrible, but it had such small portions. And so Handel juiced it up by adding a part 1 called The Lament of the Jews on the Death of whoever died. But all he did was he took his funeral music for Queen Caroline, because it was a beautiful work. The ways of Zion do mourn. I mean, it's all about Zion, so it's about the right people, and they're mourning, so that's okay. And because they're mourning at the beginning of Israel and Egypt, Pharaoh is oppressing them, and Moses hasn't popped up yet, and they're enslaved. So the people of Zion are mourning. It was the perfect part 1, exactly as it stands. Handel didn't have to do anything to it. Change a couple of words here and there. But I mean, because Queen Caroline evidently had no intention of dying more than once, and Handel wrote a magnificent funeral ode for her. So there's no point in letting it go to waste. It's absolutely lovely. So that became part 1. Now, most of the time it's omitted, but I mean, you can include it or not include it. If you add it, then you get a full-length oratorio with a fairly lengthy and rather droopy part 1. It's very beautiful, though. It's very, very beautiful. And it deals with the question of such small portions. But the whole piece, when you start with the normal 2-parter, wow, it's just glorious. And my choice for Israel and Egypt is Mackerras on Archive. Mackerras did 2 of these oratorios. He did this one and he did Saul. And they're both fabulous, and they both go in and out of print with random intervals. This may still be around, who knows. But it's absolutely fabulous, and it's got Heather Harper and Paul S. Wood, countertenor. He's sort of better than James Bowman, kind of, sort of. And the Leeds Festival Chorus and the English Chamber Orchestra, and it's Mackerras, and he just knows what he's doing. It's just great. So that's my choice for Israel and Egypt. But there are a lot of good Israels in Egypt, with or without the part 1 funeral ode. So after Israel and Egypt comes, speaking of odes, this thing, L'Allegro, il Penseroso ed il Moderato, the happy man, the thoughtful man, and the moderate man. Now, Normally, you wouldn't think that a piece that has a part 3 that deals with moderation would be interesting. But this being Handel, it actually has possibly the most gorgeous music in the entire piece. It's got that fantastic duet for tenor and soprano as Steals the Morn, which it's just so beautiful. It's so gorgeous and romantic and stunningly orchestrated. And I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, this was who's singing it here. I just have to tell you. Wait a minute. Let's see. Part 3, when he's moderating. Here's the duet. There we go. As Steals the Morn. That's the thing. Upon the night. And it's sung here magnificently. This is the Robert King Hyperion recording, which is thrilling, with the King's Consort with Susan Gritton and Lorna Anderson and Claren McFadden and Paul Agnew and Neil Davies. And it is gorgeous. Oh, God. It's such a beautiful work. It's based on poetry by Milton, which doesn't help at all. Everyone, of course, likes to think, especially in the UK, that they're English literature majors and that they understand why the superb text is going to do wonderful things for the music. Well, it's just such crap. I mean, Handel couldn't have cared less who wrote the words as long as they gave him musical inspiration, because it's the musical inspiration that matters, not how silly the words are. And Milton's words are okay, maybe it's great poetry. It all sounds the same to me. But boy, is this beautiful. And this is technically not an oratorio. It's a pastoral ode. And there are 3 of these suckers. There's this one, there's Alexander's Feast, and then there's, of course, the Ode for St. Cecilia's Day. And they're all equally great. They all could be included in the general category of sort of non-operatic Handel choral vocal large-scale work. And you might as well, but this is fabulous. And you have to have this one ode. And then you can go get the others on your own. Alexander's Feast is a hoot as well. But this is also kind of short. It's it's 2 hours and 17 minutes. Tiny little bit on the short side, but they would throw in, 2 or 3 concertos and maybe, an opera in the interval. Glorious. Hyperion, Robert King, L'Allegro. Ooh, it also has the carillon in it. As a percussionist, you have to love the carillon. Okay, next came Messiah. And I did a whole video on Messiah, so I am not worrying about Messiah. Colin Davis on Phillips. That's all we need to deal with in talking about Messiah. My favorite on period instruments is the Pinnock on Archive. You can go through all of that stuff on that video, but I mention it for the sake of completeness here. After that comes Samson. Oh, what a great story. Samson, as in Samson and Delilah. This is actually a very meditative version of the story. It does have some fabulous blood and gore in the text. Let me see if I can find it. It's like after he's blinded at the beginning of part 3. There's just some absolutely frightening text here. There's Act 2, Act the 2nd. And when Samson gets killed, let's see, noise call you this, an universal groan as if the world's inhabitants perish all, blood, death, and ruin at their utmost point. It's wonderfully bloodthirsty, even though it's kind of meditative. And Delilah, again, she's a great character. Just a great character with some real sexy music for her. So this one is on coro. This is with the 16. And it's just beautiful. I mean, these are all just wonderful performances. Handel performance, let's just say what it is. Tell the truth. It's a modern phenomenon. The style of doing this music with drama and excitement and on period instruments, which I am totally in favor of in this music. I would like them to have a little more vibrato, but if they get the scale and the energy and everything else right, oh, who cares? It just sounds great. And these recordings on coro with the 16, they've done a whole Handel series. They are really, really good. So this is a magnificent Samson. Samson's a long one, too. It's like, let's see, 70, 50, 28. Yeah, well, 2.5 hours. 2.5 fun-filled hours. Then, after Samson, come 2 amazing pieces. They are secular. They are based on Greek mythology. They are extraordinary. Some have called them operas. They have been very successfully staged. In my view, the difference between opera and oratorio is merely technical. If you can stage it and it works, it's an opera. And you might as well call it that. And if you're not staging it, you're doing it in concert form, call it an oratorio. Who cares, really? Because Handel's oratorios are very dramatic. They are truly theatrical and wonderful. And these two pieces, which some of you, of course, know, are Semele and Hercules. Here they are. They are both masterpieces. Extraordinary masterpieces and fun. Semele is one of the dumbest characters in all of opera. She gets the fabulous narcissistic hogwallow of an aria, Myself I Will Adore, which is just one of the most hedonistic and wanton things ever written for the human voice. And of course, Juno. Ooh, Juno gets to sing Iris Hence Away, which is a thrilling mezzo-soprano piece, unbelievably sung here. This is with Kathleen Battle and Marilyn Horne, conducted by John Nelson. This is the Deutsche Grammophon recording of Semele, and it is stunning, absolutely stunning. And then she has the most fantastic vocal bitch fest in all of music after Semele, incinerates herself. Then she chortles with, above measure is the pleasure my revenge supplies. Oh, it's so great. It's a tiny little da capo aria. It's like 2 minutes long, but boy, is it fun. And boy, does Marilyn Horne have a good time with it. So this is the DG John Nelson Semele with Battle and Horne and all these people and Samuel Ramey and John Aller. And oh, it's so wonderful. Hercules has the all-time greatest mad scene, Deianira's mad scene, Where Shall I Fly? Where hide this guilty hand? Oh, God, it's so wonderful. She's, inadvertently, because of jealousy, given Hercules the poisoned robe, which causes him to die, writhing in agony. And his death scene, where he dies writhing in agony, is not too shabby either. It's a pretty good writhe, let me tell you. But this is her mad scene. It's the greatest mad scene before Lucia di Lammermoor. I mean, plain and simple. And what's so amazing about it is that it's not really an aria and it's not really a recitative. It's a mad scene. It's a completely freely composed. It has a form, of course, but it just follows the text, and the words are just wonderful, wonderful words that are just so juicy. I mean, did you know that snake is an adjective? The snaky whips that the Furies bear, that they're going to lash her with, and oh God, it's wonderful because she thinks she's being pursued by the Furies. And it has the most fabulous payoff line. It's, alas, no rest the guilty find from the pursuing Furies of the mind. Oh, that's so great. That's just so great. And the way Handel sets it, no rest the guilty find, no rest the guilty find, no rest they find, no rest they find, no rest they find from the pursuing Furies of the mind. And, oh my God, it's so great. It's worth the price of the whole thing. So this one is the Gardiner recording. Oh, pardon me, Mark Minkowski. It's not Gardiner. He's coming later. Mark Minkowski with Anne-Sophie von Otter in one of her very, very best roles. Very best. Gardiner did it with Sarah Walker, which is also great. And if you get the disc Furore or whatever the hell it's called, or Dementia or something with Joyce DiDonato, it's got this on it too. I mean, this is just such a great showpiece. Deianira's mad scene. It really is for a dramatic mezzo. You just go crazy on it. And, when you listen to the music like that, and Hercules particularly, it doesn't date. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's, you think Baroque opera or Baroque oratorio, and it's stiff and formal. And no, it's not. This is red meat. I mean, this is absolutely let it all hang out, raw, dramatic, theatrical emotion, and it's as scarifying and horripilating and as gut punch direct as anything in Wozzeck. It really is. It's just phenomenal. So you got to get Hercules. You got to get Semele. I mean, they're wonderful. Okay, so that's those two. Back to the Old Testament. Sort of, yes. Next, after those two, Handel went back to his roots and gave us Belshazzar. Yeah. Now this, I think, is the longest of all the oratorios in terms of length. It's kind of like the St. Matthew Passion of the oratorios. The timing here is 2 hours and 45 minutes, but it can very easily go to 3 hours. This is the William Christie recording on his own label, Les Arts Florissants, which means maybe it has a chance of still being in print or hanging around for a bit. I mean, but this can really run to over 3 hours. This is a very, very involved oratorio. You know the story. You've got the prophet Daniel, and you've got Belshazzar, and you've got the writing on the wall, and you've got insanity and military conquest. And oh gosh, it's so much fun. And you've got three different choruses. You've got the chorus of Israelites, and you've got the chorus of Babylonians, and then you've got the chorus of like other invading people, the whatever they're called, the Euphrodisians, or I don't know what they're called, I forget. But it's just extraordinary. Another incredibly textured piece of music with really well-drawn and interesting characters. It's glorious. So Belshazzar is the next one, and this is the Christie version, as I said, which is exceptional. Should I tell you who some of the singers are? Alan Clayton, Rosemary Joshua, Caitlin Hula Hoop, who knows? And of course, the countertenor as Daniel is Yeston Davies, and Jonathan Lemalou, and they're just, it's great. So that's Belshazzar. Then come what I call the Oratorios. The Oratorios were a bunch of 3 or 4 of them that Handel wrote during the rebellion of around, 1746 to 1748, somewhere in there. The Scottish rebellion, and when they were always rebelling, the Scottish pretender to the throne, and remember that whole business. Remember Mary Queen of Scots, and that stuff was still going on, some decades later, many decades later, like many centuries later. Anyway, so there was some unrest fomented by France largely, and the pretender of the English throne, and they were marching on London, and there was that, and everybody was very upset, and there was a lot of tension. So Handel wrote a bunch of oratorios that were designed to gin up national patriotism. It didn't help that the Hanoverian kings were just nitwits for the most part, frankly. I mean, they really were, and not terribly good in battle either, although they sort of put down this particular rebellion. And the Jacobites, that's what they were, whatever they were called. So the bottom line is Handel wrote these oratorios, and they're a lot of fun, and they sort of get poo-pooed in the critical literature because they're basically about military might, and they have snare drums and lots of trumpets and exciting stuff happening, and people get annoyed because there isn't enough fetching and moaning like in the other ones. I mean, this is the one where the Jews actually get up and run around and do something, and they win, and nobody likes it when they get up and run around and show a little bit of gumption. You don't want them to get too uppity and feisty, do we? But they are very, very feisty. And Judas Maccabaeus, yeah. Alleluia, amen, amen. The final chorus there that we all sang in high school glee club, or at least I did. And this is Nick McGegan with the Philharmonia Baroque Orchestra, with Guy Demay and Lisa Saffer and all these people. I think Judas Maccabaeus is fun, but this is the one where the people are just Israelitish man and Israelitish woman. It doesn't matter who they are. They represent the people. And that's what's important. And what matters is that the Maccabees win. And as a result of that, we get Hanukkah. And that really matters. Frankly, it's nice to have Hanukkah, and Judas Maccabaeus is where we get Hanukkah. So there you go. After Judas Maccabaeus, there were a couple more, but The other really good one in the oratorios, in my view, is Joshua. Yeah, Joshua fought the Battle of Jericho and the walls came a-tumbling down. No, that particular tune does not originally appear in Handel's Joshua. But you've got the Battle of Jericho, you got the part where the sun stands still. It's got all kinds of wonderful set pieces that are just delightful. And of course, the chorus of Israelites does what they do. They complain and then they cheer. They complain and then they cheer. Then they complain and then they cheer. But they do it so well and to such wonderfully enjoyable music. And there's a love interest, which, Handel threw in there because you've got to have some sort of like human appeal in these stories. And it's just a hoot. It's fun. And you don't have to take it all that seriously. I mean, Handel called Messiah an entertainment. So if Messiah, which is about the Messiah, is just an entertainment, then Joshua is a full-blown charivari extravaganza. It's great fun. This is Robert King again with the King's Consort, and Emma Kirkby and James Bowman and Adrian Oliver and John Mark Ainsley and Michael George. And, okay, I'm hard on Bowman. I know he's not always terrible, just most of the time. So there you go. But it's a great performance of Joshua, and it's just delightful to have. So after Joshua, we get Susanna. Remember the opera by Carlisle Floyd? It's that story, Susanna and the Elders. They take her, they see her bathing nude, and they make a pass at her, and she rejects them. And when she rejects them, they get annoyed, and so they condemn her to death. And of course, God saves her. This is actually a pastoral comedy, and Handel treats it as a pastoral comedy. It's light and it's fun, and it does have some fairly nasty lyrics when they are condemning Susanna, but other than that, it's really a good time. And this also is Nick McGegan. These were beautiful when these were coming out on Harmonia Mundi. I remember when they were, and I suppose one of the reasons I still like them so much is that in the day, Harmonia Mundi used to have these wonderful road shows where they would go from city to city telling you about all their future releases, and they were in this nice hotel. They'd play you excerpts and you got snacks. And anytime you're a music critic and someone fed you and asked you to listen to their music, you fell in love with it forever. I mean, I can even remember the snacks, they just really were very good snacks most of the time. And as the record industry declined, the snacks got cheaper and cheaper until finally there was just this dismal thing that Universal did in a room with Fruit Cup. I mean, it was so pathetic. It was like unripe melon on a stick. And Harmonia Mundi, they had canapes. It was good stuff. And liquor. I don't drink, but there was liquor. It was fabulous. And they always had their Nick McGegan Handel Oratorio of the Year. And Susanna was one of them. And the snacks were particularly good that year, and this is a particularly good Susanna. So wonderful. Then, after Susanna, we only have 3 more to go, people. Hang in there. We're doing really well. We're doing really, really well. Comes Solomon. Oh, Solomon. Solomon has the arrival of the Queen of Sheba. Solomon is a countertenor, by the way, or actually an alto. Carolyn Watkinson in this excellent recording, which is why I recommend it. This is the Gardiner Solomon. This is a real classic version. It's fantastic, exciting and passionate and intense. And I particularly like Joan Rogers and Della Jones as first harlot and second harlot. Now, when the Handel edition came out originally, it's a wonderful little story. The German Handel edition that was done by Chrysander, they were called Jungfrau, maidens, first maiden and second maiden, without asking why the maidens were arguing over a baby. But Handel's day, Handel was writing during the Enlightenment, folks, and in the Enlightenment they called it like it was. They were harlots, and Handel called them harlots. And one of the things that I've always been dying to see. Whenever I see, the biographies that you see in all of these, like record notes or in live concerts in opera houses where they do the bios and the program booklets, I've just always wanted to see some singer said, she was particularly acclaimed for her role as the second harlot in Solomon. It's so great. Oh, God. But I have to say, I've got to share some text with you here, because the scene with the harlots is such a hoot, and it's really like terrifying. First harlot. Here we are. Where do we step up that? Here we go. Oh, there we go. This is just so unbelievably gross. Okay, it's on disc 2, track 4. Withhold the executing hand. Wait a minute. I want you to just hear the words, because it just goes to show how different and politically incorrect and honest these people were in so many respects. It's so different from the way we are today with these things. They were so unsqueamish about them. Up here they are. Hang on there. I'm just up. There we go. Here it is. This is the first harlot. And she sings after the second harlot says, yeah, cut the baby in half. No problem. I'll take my half. She can have hers. But she sings, can I see my infant gourd? Oh, my God. With the fierce, relentless sword, can I see him yield his breath, smiling in the hour of death, and behold the purple tides gushing down his tender sides. Whoa! Right? I mean, it's a great scene, a fabulous scene, but gripping. And Handel is not out to spare us any of the gory imagery that the actual situation entails. I mean, he really brings it home. It's fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. And the second harlot is such a bitch. Oh my God, such a bitch. The first one is singing this, and while she's singing it, the second one is going, false is all her melting tale. False is all her melting tale. It's just great. I know. I should get credit as second harlot in Solomon. I can do a bang-up second harlot, let me tell you. So, Solomon. After Solomon, we come to the last two. And these are two of Handel's very, very greatest works, and they really are as good as unknown, shockingly unknown. Handel's own favorite oratorio was Theodora. It is a Christian story. Theodora is a Christian, but the story is, she could be Martian for all that it matters, because the basic story is she is faithful to her church, she is in love with a Roman soldier, and she is condemned because she will not renounce her faith to be sent into prostitution. And with some fabulously licentious and smarmy choruses of Roman soldiers who are relishing the thought of what they're going to do to her as soon as she gets sent into the whorehouse. It's just terrific. But the actual music of Theodora is so beautiful. It is incredibly beautiful. The music that she gets to sing is exquisite, absolutely exquisite. And she is the origin of all of those nobly suffering women that we find in like later operas, especially English operas. The kind of thing that Janet Baker always did. You suffer nobly before you die. It's just fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And the music will shock you with its modernity and its beauty. I mean, it's timeless. It's no wonder that Handel loved it so much. It's an extraordinary, extraordinary work. And he was, getting on in blindness when he wrote it, and it is obviously was very meaningful to him, and he really gave it his best. It's magnificent. And this is also William Christie, with Les Arts Florissants, with Sophie Donovan and Daniel Taylor and Richard Croft and Nathan Berg and Juliet Galatian. There you go. It's great. It's just a great piece. And get to know it. I mean, if you're going to limit your oratorios and just get, only 4 or 5 out of this list, let Theodora be one of them, really, and sit down with the words and really give it a serious listen. You will not be sorry. I promise you. It is stunningly beautiful. Everyone I know, actually, everyone I know who's heard it is just shocked at how beautiful and affecting and theatrically, meaningful and emotional the whole thing is. It's just great. It's got some fabulous love music for Theodora and her Roman boyfriend. It's wonderful. Finally, last but not least, there is Jephtha, which is impossible to pronounce. Jephtha. Jephtha is basically this is first. Let's talk about the performance. This is again the 16 with Harry Christophers on coro, with James Gilchrist, Susan Bickley, Sophie Bevan, Robin Blaze, Matthew Brooke, Grace Davidson. It's a wonderful performance again. The Gardiner is also excellent. The thing about Jephtha is that it has a bit of a letdown at the end. And this is the reason for it. The story is basically, it's one of those, it's an iconic story. It's the same as The Sacrifice of Isaac. It's the same as Mozart's Idomeneo. It's Jephtha says he'll kill the first person he sees if God will only do can be grant him victory in battle. It can be like get rid of the plague. It can be whatever the deal is. He makes a deal. And the deal is to sacrifice, the first person, and as if God, who is supposed to be all merciful, wants that, but he has to do it. And of course, the first person he sees is his daughter. Oh boy. And so he spends the rest of the oratorio trying to get out of the deal and finding some creative way to welch. And of course, Handel and God are not going to let his daughter get, like this because of that kind of a deal. That's just not the way things work. What's her name? I never get it. Iphis, is that her name? Yes, something like that. Yes, Iphis. And she's really, just a sweet young thing. And so rather than just leaving her alone or killing her and making it tragic, she is required to become a virgin and take holy orders or something like that, which is, it's such an obvious, transparent device to get past the issue of what are they going to do with this woman once all of that business is over and the whole plot has sorted itself out. However, Jephtha is famous for its extraordinary wealth of harmonic and even chromatic richness in the choruses, some stunning choruses, some of the greatest music Handel ever wrote. Another story that I think he felt very deeply, even if the denouement is a trifle unsatisfactory. And again, it's his last oratorio. It's a great work. His last fully original oratorio that wasn't a pasticcio, that wasn't built out of earlier stuff or, assembled in bits from other works. There was one last shot at, the Triumph of Time and Truth, or one of those things that he wrote, every few years throughout his career, another version popped up, and that was one of them. But Jephtha was the end, and a magnificent ending it was, and it is, and hopefully it provides an equally magnificent ending to this excessively long talk on the 15 ideal Handel oratorios, not a weak link amongst them. So keep on listening, folks. Go get 'em.